Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today for topic 2 of our intermediate Canvas training series. And today we're going to be talking all about instructional design best practices. And so to start off with, for those of you that are live or those of you watching this recording, I just want you to take a moment and think back. If you've ever taken a course online, for example, or taken a course that used some sort of LMS on the side, think back to situations where maybe you had a tough time with that particular course. Back in 2016 and 2017, I took some grad school courses, and I actually encountered a couple situations where classes were not running very well because of the poor design. So, because it was all online, we relied on our LMS. At the time, it was Blackboard, but I mean, the same rules apply no matter what LMS that you're using. So, uh, I remember encountering Blackboard and you'd go in the class and like you couldn't figure out what you were supposed to do for the week. You couldn't find the assignment links. Come to find out later that they just didn't have the button published. You'd find different duplicates of the assignments with different due dates, so you weren't really sure when things were due. It was just kind of a mess. And I remember really struggling through that course, and a lot of my peers were also struggling through it. And that's just kind of an example in my past of like encountering a class that really didn't have good design elements in it. And so I'm sure if you've taken some online programs lately in the last like 10 years or so, you've probably encountered at least something challenging in one of those courses. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, though, is good instructional design best practices, and so how you can set up your course so that it's easier for your students to navigate. Now, this also helps you as the teacher because it can make sure that things are running smoothly and you're not doing as much troubleshooting. So a lot of times, when things break or something goes wrong with a student, it's usually a setting we have to change somewhere in Canvas to clear it up. So yeah, I wanted to cover this today. In the chat, I did post a link to a course design checklist, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen and I'll have that checklist up here. I'll also add this to the Canvas course where you're watching this recording. So let's share screen here. I'm going to close out of my email here. Okay, so this is a course design checklist that I made. In my previous world, I was a teacher for OPS, and then I became an instructional designer at Creighton University. And one of my jobs was to review courses uh, for accreditation and all that stuff. So before a course would get launched, they'd send it to me. I was assigned to the School of Ed, the counseling program, all that stuff. And I would just review their courses using a checklist. It was just a real quick thing to go through, and then I could help them, make sure that that course was good to go when it rolled out. And I really based a lot of this on a instructor that I had when I was in grad school, because after my bad experience in Blackboard, I was like, I don't think I'm going to survive an online grad program. But then the next course I took, it was with an instructor who had taught online before, and the course was organized, it was easy to follow, and it really made me realize that, good course design goes a long way in the student experience and in the teacher experience. So I kind of created this checklist based on some of those things that I saw that helped me. Now, this is not an official OPS document, so this is not something that was created that you have to follow 100%. It's just more of my suggestions. And then I also like to provide the caveat that some of these design elements might not work for every type of class. So there are different types of classes that are utilizing Canvas that might not need, for example, a syllabus page. It just kind of depends how you like to structure your stuff. But these are just some general guidelines for things that you can follow. And we're going to kind of go through this and talk about how you can implement these in Canvas. So to start off with, we have the getting started area. The one is to copy the course template. I know some people like the course template. Some people choose to do their own course templates. Just a reminder for the course template, this will set up a lot of these settings for you. So it is something you can use and then make changes to that as opposed to starting from scratch, but it's up to you. So there is that course template. If you want a reminder on how to set up that particular course template, please check out one of my beginner training courses. We do cover that usually, and one of the first trainings. So we show how to pull that template into your course. Then just filling out those pages. And then the first thing that we can do to customize our course is removing and adding navigation items. So if I go to Canvas here, let me just go to, let's find one that's probably going to have an issue. So if I click on this course, when you're looking at a course, you'll notice that there's some items here along the side. This is your course navigation. And the ones that your students will see will not have these little eyeballs next to them. So the little eyeball with a slash, what that means is your students can see it, or your students can't see it, but you can. So that's what these eyeball slashes are. But everything that doesn't have an eyeball slash is going to be something that's going to be visible to your students. So if I go into student view, by the way, I know one district personnel's videos in here, but I promise I built this course. So any mistakes that I find are on me. If I come in here though, and I look over to the side, I'll notice that I got all these extra navigation items here. So there's like launch code, HS, Newslia, formative. I don't even know what some of those are. I know what formative is, but not the other ones. So there's all these different navigation items. Well, generally speaking, when you're talking about course design, one of the big things that you should consider doing to assist your students is only leaving necessary buttons in that navigation area. The less buttons there are, the easier it's going to be for your students to know where to go. So I look to the side, I see these extra buttons here. What I'm going to do to get rid of those is I can actually go to my settings area. So there's a settings button down here in the bottom left. Hopefully this is showing up in the recording, but if I scroll down there, settings, I go here, and then I can come to the top, and over here is the navigation button. From here, I can click and drag items that are going to show up in my navigation. So if I look up here, I've got home, announcements, modules, and then I got all these extra ones. I don't really need anything underneath modules. So what I'm going to do to get rid of them is I'm just going to click and drag. So if I come over here to these dots and I click and I drag them, I can drag them down to the bottom. I'm just going to drag all those extra buttons down here. Let's say that there's a button down here that I do want. Like let's say that I use class notebook. So I want class notebook in my navigation. Same process. I just have to click and drag it up. And then what this will do is it will put only the necessary buttons there for your students to access. So, you know, if your class does use formative, you can leave that button up here if you want. If you want your students to have a grades button, or they can click and check their grades, you can drag that up. So it kind of depends on your personal preference. But the key is to not have anything pointless up there. So like a lot of those apps are apps that got added after I built this course. And so that's why those buttons were there. So, but because we're not using them, we just want to get rid of them to kind of clear that up. So now when I am all done adjusting how I want this to look, I'm not actually going to add class notebook. I can hit save. And then if I come back here, I can see that this adjusted itself, and there's only a few buttons without the eyeballs. Well, notice that announcements has the eyeball, even though I have it in there. The reason that that's not showing up for students is because I haven't posted any announcements. Once you post an announcement, that button will open up. So if I click student view as a student, I can see that it's only home and modules. And so it really kind of cleans up this area, makes it a lot easier to navigate. One of the keys to instructional design is making sure that your students know where to go to access their content. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do that in a specific way. It just means that you're doing it in a way that makes sense. So in this case, this course is organized by modules. So there's buttons down here that have modules in it. So module 1, module 2, module 3, 4, 5. They can either click here to go to their module, or if they want to see the whole modules page, they only have one other option. So they come up here and they click modules, and then that brings them to the modules area. So uh, simplifying that navigation keeps them from getting lost, allows them to find their stuff a little easier. Because I always get questions about this, I did want to mention this as well. But a lot of people ask me why I don't use like the assignments or discussions buttons over here on the side. Um, it's not a required thing that you have to or don't want to use those. It's just my personal preference. I don't use the assignments button and I don't use the discussions button or the quizzes button over here on the side because I just want my students to go to the modules. So when I post things into a module, I just want everything to be located there. I don't want them to have, like, for example, come into module 3 and find an assignment link, but then also there's an assignments button up here, and then it looks like that assignment is in two different places, but really it's not. And so I just have found over time through trial and error, mostly error, but I've found out over time that what works for me best is to just have everything, all my links in my modules and not worry about those other navigational buttons. So just something to consider. Let me leave student view here. Let's go to another course. So let's go to, we'll look at this one that I'm building right now. So if I go back over to my document here, let's see what we got next. There's cross-listing sections. That's something that I suggest people do to make their lives a little easier if they are, if they are, for example, teaching multiple sections of the same course. Again, I cover this in my beginner level training, but cross-listing your courses basically takes, like, if you teach like 5 of the same class, like 5 sections of one class, you can combine all those classes into Canvas. So that's something to consider just for your own sanity. Helps you keep things more organized. And so I do consider that as part of the course design checklist because I do think it's a good practice to cross list, because otherwise you're recreating the same thing 3, 4, 5 times, however many sections you have. The next item down on the list is organizing your course. So this is a big one. Determine your course organization, and then I should probably include a little side note that is stick to it. So if I go to a class here, this class that I'm working on, I go to modules, which in this course I have my modules turned off, the modules button. But if I come in here, it doesn't really matter how I decide to organize these modules. What does matter is being consistent with it throughout the semester. So for example, if I look at my modules, I have like the title, I have an overview page, and then I got the activities listed down here. And I follow that same idea in each module. And this course is a work in progress, which is why some of these modules aren't totally filled out yet. But if I scroll down, you'll notice it's the exact same. And so the idea behind that is, for course design, is helping keep your students from getting lost. They'll know what to do. So for example, if these were by week, let's say it was week 1, file management, they know that they would come here, they'd find their overview page and their activities would be listed below. And that activity page would includes my course objectives. So if I click on this, I don't think that one's done. No, it's not. Let me find a more complete one. Like this one. I have the resources, activities listed. My objective isn't expressly stated, but it is located up in here when you read the description. So I can contain all that basic teacher stuff in my overview page. And then there's quick links over to the activities and resource pages. Otherwise, students can just access it from the module side. So that's just an example. So basically just being consistent with it. So some teachers organize their modules by unit. Some teachers organize it by week. Some teachers organize it by month. It doesn't really matter what you choose. That's not really determined by good instructional design best practices, at least not as far as I know. But what is important is just being consistent with it. So each week or each month or each unit that your students go to your content, they'll have that familiar organization so that they know how to find what they're looking for. The next thing And I'm not going through all of these obviously for time purposes, but there's like buttons to navigate. So what this means is like you can make buttons in your course that stand out a little bit. So for example, on that last course, or on one of the courses I was in before, I'm going to go to everybody's favorite class. This is another one I built. The district mandatory health and safety priority trainings. That was me. But if you, please don't hate me if you don't like it. But if you come down here, you'll notice that I have buttons for my modules. Now, what this means is you can click on the button and it brings it to it. Now, my other option would be just to place a link. But if I did that, it can sometimes be easier to lose. So like if I just have like a little link right below here, it might not be as easy to see as say a button. And when I say a button, what that means is what I did, if I go to edit up here, what I did was I created a picture. Now, I use Canva to create my pictures. You can create your pictures however you want. And then what I do is I upload them onto the page in Canvas. So I add my image. And then what I can do is I can do the insert and then link button. And so if I insert and link, what I can do is I can add a link to a place within my Canvas course. So let me try this. Go to dashboard. We can try this. Okay. This one I'm not afraid to mess with. So if I click this image that I've uploaded into my course, and again, this is just a picture. What I can do after I've inserted my image is I can click to highlight it. So it's highlighted right now. And then I can hit insert, link, and then it gives me the options of an external link or a course link. So if I'm using this to navigate somewhere in a course, I can hit the course link button. And this brings up my pages, assignments, quizzes, announcements, and even your modules. And so what you can do is you can go through here, click a link, and then that is going to turn that picture into a button. So I like to use that again because it just stands out more than just posting like a horizontal link at the bottom of a page. Just my personal preference. But I use a lot of buttons in my courses, and that's what I'm referring to. So again, all it is a picture with a link attached to it, and that link is attached to my course. Now, the other benefit is, let's say I'm going to use this course again next year, and I copy that content over. It doesn't break this link. It actually updates it. So for example, if I build a course and this link is going to my homepage or something, like the link behind this picture, it will adjust to the homepage of my most recent course. So I don't have to go in and fix it every year either. If you did, I probably wouldn't use buttons because I wouldn't want to relink everything every time I copied the course. But because they auto adjust, it's all good. So that's why I like that. I'm going to hit cancel so I don't save that change. Okay. Next thing I want to talk about is due dates. So due dates, that's probably one of the most important ones in my course pacing area. Due dates you can set in a variety of different ways. So if I go over to, let's go back to the district mandatory health and safety priority trainings. If I come back in here, and again, more buttons, and let's say I click on training one, and I come in here. Now, you might notice if I show my dates here that there are dates listed. Like all of these were due September 30th. There's another one due January 31st. Don't panic. They haven't sent any info out about that yet. But it lists the due dates and the times. This is a really good practice to adopt. So every time I create an assignment, a discussion, or even in just an important page that I want my students to see, I will add a due date to it because what it does is it creates a link in the to-do list, which is usually located right up here. So it makes it so it's hard to miss for your students if they have an assignment coming up or a quiz coming up. Even if it's not an actual due date, I just use it as a reminder date that, hey, we're doing it this day, kind of a thing. So it kind of keeps it in their digital calendar. If I hit edit here, if I scroll down, and this is on every type of page that you'll encounter, you can actually click and add to student to do button down here. And if I click that, I can set a reminder date that then ends up on their to-do list. So this is a good reminder if they go to a page or something, or it's a page you really want to highlight for them. You can set a date that it's going to add to their to-do list, and then once you hit save, it adds it to that list. And so I always make sure that my stuff is tied to a date. General like information pages, I don't need to really add to the to-do list. But if it's something important, like let's say you've uploaded, a field trip form, like a parental permission for a field trip form or something, and you've put that on a page in Canvas and you want to make sure that your students are accessing it, you can add that to their to-do list by clicking this button down here. Of course, in assignments, we covered that in a lot of the beginner ones, but you just can add a due date to an assignment as well. But anytime you add a date to something, it shows up in the student to-do list. And that is a good design practice to get into because it can really clarify things for students. And unless you set it that way, the due date doesn't mean that it just closes off once it's done. So if you have a student with an IEP or something that needs extended due dates, you can, but you don't have to manually go in and create a separate due date for them, because it's just don't set it to lock on the due date, basically. So they'll turn it in. Canvas might say that it was late, but then that doesn't do anything. You can even remove that. So it's up to you how you want to handle that. But the point is, I add due dates to everything. Huge, huge indicator of success for courses. I used to get copies of all the student reviews for the Canvas courses that I worked on with staff at Creighton. And a lot of students would mention that they really liked having all the due dates listed, because not every professor did that. They'd push out assignments and there wouldn't be a due date, or the due date would just be in the description. So the due date would be in the description, but it wouldn't be actually assigned to the page. So because it was assigned to the page itself or to the assignment itself, it would show up in their to-do list versus just typing it into the page. Then it doesn't show up on their to-do list. So that was always a big thing that people commented, was they liked how there was due dates on everything. So let me see. About out of time, so I'll probably cover one more thing. So we did pages and assignments, adding those due dates. I covered the link validator in the last training, in the last training, accessibility. So you can run a checker to check for accessibility and validating links in your content. Check out training 1 in this series for information on how to do that. And then just checking your pages for typos, making sure that you don't have stuff on your pages that contradicts itself. So the last thing I'll probably show you is module pacing. If I go to a course, I'm playing around with a real course here. I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to do it anyway. I click the 3 dots here, and if I hit edit, what I can do is I can set prerequisites. So if I do a prerequisite, that means that I'm setting things that students have to complete before they can access this module, or I can set a requirement to complete certain items, and then you can list them out. So if I do complete all, I can come down here and I can do plus requirement to add more. But when I go to add a requirement, I just have to fill out the information. What is the content type? What do they have to do with it? So in this one, they have to view the page. They have to click on it. But if I wanted to, I could have them mark it as done, which basically means they have to tap on it on the front page to mark it as complete, or even contribute to it. So if it's a discussion board, I can put that, and then they do have to contribute to that discussion board before it can be unlocked. So that's another way, that's a way that you can really set things up in your course so that you're moving students along. And really, everything we've talked about today is geared towards one thing. It's making sure your students don't get lost in your content. So eliminating those extra buttons, using actual buttons instead of just little links that might be missed, making sure that extra buttons aren't turned on, and then, of course, like setting these requirements so that they have to work through the course in a sequential order if you want. Really, all of it is geared towards that one purpose. That's probably the biggest thing in instructional design is just making sure students don't get lost. You want them to get there, be able to find their content, um, and that's just from the design process. Obviously, there's the pedagogy part that we didn't talk about today, but you're more of the expert in that. My area of expertise is more how do we navigate through this course? How do we set it up so students don't get lost and that they know what's going on and they can find their content? You'll find that your students and yourself will be a lot happier. So use those due dates. Get rid of those pointless buttons that don't need to be there, um, and use some of these controls to guide your students. I know this was a real quick crash course, but are there any final questions before we take off for today? Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So have a great day. Please feel free to, if you're watching this recording, there will be a link underneath of this to the course design checklist that we used today. Again, it's not definitive and not everything on there might be useful for your particular subject, but it's stuff that can guide you in the right direction. Just think of it like guiding your students through the jungle, you know. You want your students to be able to access your content and be able to find everything that they need. That's really the biggest key to instructional design. Designing a course anyway. So, thank you very much. Have a great day. Of course, feel free to reach out and email me if you ever have any questions.